I tell my kids all the time that I love them. I hug them and show them that affection. So it taught me to do things in the opposite way when it came to that part of it, where I felt the lack inside of the home on a personal level. It made me intensify it when it came to my children, or even in my relationship. You know, I feel like I'm very affectionate, and, you know, I want to be reciprocated in that manner as well. So I feel like in those areas, it taught me to be better. Like, this is not what, I don't want to be what I saw. I want to, you know, put my love into action. And it's like, yeah, we celebrated birthdays and stuff. You did things like that. But like, if my kids were involved in sports, I'm going to show up. Like, I was a cheerleader. I ran track. You know, I was on honor roll. I did all these things. My parents were never present.
These kind of relationships that get disturbed when we don't take the time to know what it is to sing, to know how to get close to the mic again. But it's singing doesn't make it happen, or maybe.
Welcome to another episode of Tune the Fork. I have with me mother, daughter, mental health advocate, author, just one of the most beautiful people I've ever met in my life, and the first girl I ever kissed on the cheek.
Right.
LaDora Annette Johnson. You know I gotta throw the Annette in there.
I know.
Thank you so much for being here.
I am happy that I could be here. This is a blessing. Like, this is crazy. Like, for real.
So, aside from family members, I have known you longer than anyone. So we met.
Yeah.
5 years old.
5 years old.
My grandmother moved into the house right next to the house you were in.
Yeah.
We've been through grade school, high school, middle school.
Everything. And literally everything.
And I'm setting the stage for that portion of it just so people can know our history and just, you know, how we got here, and some of the conversations we'll probably talk about will the fact that they know that we have, you know, we go back such a long way will help kind of like add some context to it. Right. How you been?
I've been pretty good. I mean, I've had to kind of sit back and do some self-care just because of the things that I've had on my plate lately. But other than that, I'm good.
Good.
I'm good.
Now, you just turned, can I tell the age?
Yeah.
You just turned 47. I'm gonna be 47 in a few months, and that's 42 years of knowing somebody.
That's it. Our whole life, basically.
I am really happy to have witnessed, or at least understand, you know, kind of what you've been going through and what your journey has looked like. And the fact that we're still connected and cool after all of this time.
Man, you are family. Like, that ain't never, even when it's periods where we don't talk or see each other, it's always gonna be love. Always gonna be love. Like, you was kind of my first love, I guess. Maybe my first crush.
Same.
And I was like, dang.
We were supposed to get married.
Supposed to. I don't know what you did.
Listen,
you messed it up.
That ain't me. That ain't.
You messed it up.
Something happened in the stars. It was like, I don't feel that way. Like, we like way. Brothers more so than the other.
It was just like we evolved into more of a friendship. Yeah. Like, that was more brother and sister than anything, and that felt right.
It felt right.
And so you go with what feels right. And I'm just happy we're still connected. It's so many people that don't have what we have or didn't make it this far because of, you know, they could be dead or anything, but the fact that we're still here and we still have the amount of love that we have for each other, like it's nothing I wouldn't do for you. If you ever ask me like, hey, LaDora, can you, of course, you know, it's never a question. And I feel the same if I were to ever reach out to you. I'm just honored that you even asked me to be here today to share on your podcast. I think this is an excellent platform for you. And you've been doing amazing, because I've been following you and listening to the people, and you saying you proud to have me here, but I'm like, all of these amazing people you've literally had. And then the interview with your mom, that really blew my mind, because I mean, you know. So it's like, wow, that was like such a breakthrough moment, you know, and just to hear her be that transparent, like, I loved it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That a lot of people who know our story definitely really shared similar sentiments, just because of how broad of the spectrum was that we ran to just get to where we are now. And you know, one of the titles that I used was mental health advocate. I wanted to highlight, and Arthur, I highlighted, I did buy your book.
Thank you for the support.
I read it.
Thank you for doing that.
And I was blown away.
Okay.
I was blown away. You come from a very religious background.
Very.
Your father was a pastor, mother's first lady. He wasn't just a pastor, he was a prominent figure in the Episcopalian community. Yeah. A lot of what you shared in this book, I feel, based on what I know about your family, really exposed a lot about not just you, but some of the family dynamics.
Yeah.
And what made you want to write this book?
I wanted people to understand who I am. That was the one thing. And then I wanted to be able to put my story out there in hopes that I can help someone else. There's other women who are too ashamed or too scared to say anything about what they've experienced in relationships and even in their family dynamics. And I wanted to be that voice for someone to know that you can go through divorce. You can be a single mom. You can be raised in a strict religious environment and still be successful. And I just wanted to tell my story, because other people tell theirs, but I always say it's two sides to every story, really three: mine, yours, and the truth. And so that's my truth.
You were married twice and divorced twice.
Yes.
The first marriage, based on how you described it in this book, could be a movie.
Yeah.
Just, it was things that, as a close member, basically a family member of yours, like an extended family member, I wouldn't have had any idea that you were actually going through those things. It was abusive. You had to deal with a lot of infidelity and just second guessing yourself, and even coming out of character as a woman. But through all of that, you had two children.
Yes. So initially, my son was, I got pregnant with him out of wedlock. So the guy that I was pregnant by at the time, he was also a member of our church. And so when Tyler was born in April. So by that December, we were married. And I married him because I felt like it was the right thing to do. Not necessarily because I felt like I loved him. I had love for him, but I wasn't in love with him. And he had already talked to my father about wanting to marry me. And my dad was like, well, go see the world first. If you feel the same way, come back and, you know, I'll give you my blessing. So he enlisted in the military, and that's a whole nother issue because I didn't even know he did that. Didn't know he had taken the test. I didn't know he had got accepted. I didn't know he had a deployment date. I was 9 months pregnant. He picked me up for work and said, by the way, I'm leaving, I believe on April the 17th. My due date was April 15th. And anybody who's been pregnant or around pregnant people know you're not always giving birth on the day that the doctor said you're due. Just in my situation, I happened to give birth on April 15th, which was the due date for my son. And he left 2 days later. And then I didn't see him for like the next 3 or 4 months. And when I did see him, we got married.
And through that time, you end up going through the trials and tribulations that you went through, families involved, end up having another child. The divorce ends, and you get married again. And I know that I'm really accelerating because your story, as broad as it is, could be 5 episodes of the things that you. And I encourage anyone to go and get the book Happily, Never After. But I'm trying to ultimately get to the point to where you're dealing with these issues as it relates to your son.
Okay.
And the issues around mental health and how a lot of what was happening as it relates to that started to come to play.
Okay.
And you started becoming aware of it.
So their father, after I decided to leave him because it was abusive and verbally and physically abusive, and when I decided to leave, he still wanted me. So we were separated about 3 years before I actually got the divorce official. And in that time frame, he didn't want to have anything to do with his children because I didn't want to have anything to do with him. And even though his mom would always want to get the kids and things like that, he would live with her, but he would like stay in his room. He wouldn't even see them. At one point, he told my kids they couldn't call him dad. They had to call him by his first name. So that's how bad it was. And even years after we divorced, he stalked and harassed me. Like literally, I had to get restraining order after restraining order. I had to even get one for my job because he would just be waiting in the parking lot for me, things like that. So he never built a healthy relationship with my children. And as they became older, he would be confrontational with them versus being a nurturing person that they needed. And that always affected my son in a negative way because he didn't understand. And he would always tell them it was my fault. So whereas it rolled off my daughter like water off a duck's back, my son absorbed those things and he held on to it and always blamed me, even though I did everything for him. So you fast forward, years later, I marry a guy. My kids are now teenagers in high school and middle school, and he got my son smoking weed. And when I found out and approached him about it, he said, well, I'd rather him do it with me than do it with somebody else, and they may try to do something to him. I'm like, but that's my son. That's your stepson, so you should be the example of what
that was
not
your
to
husband?
do. That was my husband. That's how I knew my son was smoking weed. But at the same time, I periodically would have my son in and out of counseling because I knew something was wrong with their dad. And just instinct or God, I don't know what it was, but I just felt like I don't want my son to mimic who he is as a father. And so he would do it every now and then when he didn't want to, I didn't push it. So fast forward, I get separated and divorced from my second husband. And my son was graduating high school. He had a full-time job. He graduated high school. But before he graduated, they get tickets, like 10 tickets. He had his dad as a person that he wanted to come. And I said, are you sure? Because like I said, his dad hadn't been involved. And so I was like, you sure? He was like, yeah, I talked to him. He said he's coming. I said, okay. So he had the ticket set aside, gave it to his grandmother, and he didn't show up for the graduation. So that was the first strike. The second strike with my son is that after graduation, he still forgave his dad. Then he decided he wanted to go live with him. Now, you're not living with him, you're living with your grandmother because that's her house, and nobody's had a conversation to say, this is okay, we don't know what this is gonna look like. You know, you're just jumping into these deep waters. But of course, he thinks he know what he's doing. So he got his own car and everything. And he's like, I'm gonna do it. Went over there, stayed like a week, didn't work out. He was back at home. And I didn't say anything, I just left him. So the third strike, I returned from Arizona. This was around Christmas time of 2015. Yeah, 2015. I had returned from Arizona, and just casually, as I'm driving, he says, oh, by the way, me and my dad had a fight. I said, a fight? What kind of fight? Like an argument? He said, no, a fist fight. I literally stopped the car and like, what do you mean a fist fight? Like, he's never disciplined my son or anything. He said, yeah, he didn't like that I went out for New Year's Eve or Christmas or whatever it was. And he said, so he made me sit in his barber chair and he cut my hair off. So my son had dreads, and his dad is a barber by nature. So as punishment to my 18-year-old who's grown, he forces him to sit in a chair and cuts his hair off. And then, so my son says, I think you want to fight me. And he said, I do, and told him to take the first punch. So my son did. And basically tore up his grandmother's basement, fighting his son. So fast forward after that, I started noticing just like my son would just ask me random questions. Like, how are you, my mom? How did I get here? Or I come home and he'll be pacing back and forth, talking to himself, having a full-blown conversation. And then I noticed like his cell phone camera was taped up. He was like, oh no. He was like, I don't want the government to find me. The police are looking for me. Like, no police are looking for you. You don't have a warrant. You don't have tickets. You haven't been in trouble ever. And then like I had a big screen TV in our townhouse, and the camera on the TV was taped up. And I come home like the canned goods was sitting on top of the cabinets. And it just be a bunch of bizarre behavior. So I started recording different things. And then right before his 19th birthday, I talked him into doing a voluntary stay at the mental health hospital to get evaluated. And we sat in the car with the radio off because he thought the people could hear us. And I finally talked him into going in. And when I picked him up, they told me paranoid schizophrenia.
So that was what he was officially diagnosed with.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And how old was he at the time?
That was like literally a couple of days before his 19th birthday.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did that impact your family? Was there a level of, did you guys understand what that necessarily meant at that time?
I had no idea. I had never heard of schizophrenia before. I just knew they left him, they discharged him with meds. And one minute he was on his meds, next minute he was off. I ordered some new ones. He said I flushed him down the toilet. And then after that, he disappeared.
Meaning?
He went missing. I came home from work. I called home from work to ask my daughter, was he there? I wanted to speak to him. And she was like, I don't think he's here. And so I was like, okay, maybe he's hanging out with one of his friends. So I come home that night from work, and he still wasn't there. The next morning, he wasn't there. So I gave it a couple of days, but in the meantime, I'm calling around, asking my family, asking his friends. Nobody had seen or heard from him. And I noticed he had a duffel bag in his room that was my dad's, that after he died, my mom gave to him, and that bag wasn't in his room. And I said, I think he's gone, like he left. And that's when I filed the missing persons report.
And when you filed the report, what was that process like? Not really having much experience with mental health and even with that kind of stuff in general. What was that like?
It wasn't even about the mental health piece for me at that time. It was just, I need to know where my son is. Okay. So I go to the police station and I tell them, hey, I need to file a report. My son is missing. Well, how old is he? I say he's 19. And I was told he's allowed to disappear. That's what I was told. And I said, that's unacceptable. This is my son. And I said, he was recently diagnosed with schizophrenia. He's not on his meds. So I need to file a police report. And literally after begging and pleading for about 30 minutes at the police station, they finally took the report.
And where did you find him?
So fast forward, almost 7 months later, it was that was September of 2016, September 27th to be exact, when I filed the report. Fast forward to April, the weekend of April the 14th. My daughter was a senior in high school at that time, and his birthday's on the 15th. And I had prayed the night before. I said, tomorrow is my son's birthday. I said, he'll be coming out of his teens into his 20s. We've literally spent every birthday together for the last 19 years. I said, God, at this point, I just want to know if he's dead or alive. I said, either way, I'm going to accept what your will is for my son. And I said, because he's technically not mine. You just lent him to me for this period of time. So whatever it is, I need closure. And I said, tomorrow's his birthday. If you can make that happen, I'll be satisfied. So my daughter knew it was his birthday. So she said, well, can we go prom shopping? Which was the 15th, that Sunday. And so I said, yes. So we went prom shopping. We got back home. And that night, I was thinking, oh, the sun is going down. I haven't heard anything one way or the other. And that was the only thing I asked for God, because I didn't want to be sad that day. And literally 10:33, because that's etched in my memory bank, I look at my phone and I see that it's Raymore Police Department calling me. And my heart started beating so fast. And when I answered the phone, he says, Miss Johnson, we recovered your son, but you need to call U.S. Customs and Border Patrol. And I'm like asking all these questions. He said, that's all I know. They have your son. Call this person. I called. They recovered him from Mexico. And that was on the night of his 20th birthday. So God answered my prayer.
What was he doing in Mexico?
Don't know. To this day, I don't know. He won't talk about it. How he got from Missouri to Mexico, I have no idea. To this day, I don't know. And so when they questioned him, because the way God is so strategic, he was walking in an area where the building was for the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol police, and it was a restricted area. And they saw him and saw that he was all disheveled. and, called him over and started talking to him. And they realized that something was wrong with him. He told them he had cancer. He told them that all of his family was dead. And I don't know if they fingerprinted him or just ran his name. And that's when he came up in the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children database as a missing person. And that's how they knew to contact Missouri Police Department and contact me.
When you initially found out that there was this diagnosis, what was your family's reaction to that?
When I first told them, they were like, oh, he's just faking. I had a couple of people say he was faking, or that he was just wanting a check. First of all, my kids didn't know anything about a check being associated with any type of mental illness or illness at all, because we hadn't experienced that. Like, my kids were rather green to a lot of things. And so I knew that wasn't it. And then for you to tell me that he's faking, why would somebody fake like that? At most, I thought the weed he was smoking was laced.
Okay.
And maybe somebody did something and he's hallucinating, but he'll come down off the high, but he never did.
I'm trying to process what you're saying, because I know that your family is like faith first, and dealing with something like that, I don't know why I just get the feeling like, hey, we can pray it away type.
Nobody has ever, to this day, Nobody has ever prayed for my son. Other than my mom, like praying for him over the phone. But like what we know, laying on of hands, I've seen blind eyes open. I've seen deaf people hear. I've seen dead people come back to life, because that's the kind of ministry that God used my dad to have. I've seen miracles. I believe in miracles. That's why I believe in God, even to this day. And nobody.
What do you think that's about?
I don't know. I think about that to this day. Still don't know. People don't even ask how he's doing. I just volunteer to update people. Every now and then people say, how's Ty?
That's crazy, LaDora.
Nobody. I have people that aren't related to me that will reach out to me and ask about my son before my family will. If I'm not talking about him, it's like he doesn't exist. I would say randomly, somebody might say something. But I don't know if they feel like that's a sore subject for me, or they're just caught up in their own stuff that they just kind of don't care. I'm not sure. And for me, I just try not to feel some type of way, because everybody is not me. Like if I had a nephew or a niece that was struggling like that, and knowing what all we've been through, I would always be like, well, how is such and such? Like, everything good? Like, I wouldn't wait for that person to bring them up for that to be a conversation.
Do you think that is just the way your family handles stuff, though?
It could be. That's not the way I handle things, but it could be. I don't know. And I just try not to dwell on that.
Yeah.
And it's crazy that you asked that question, because I just had that conversation with someone about this same thing just a few weeks ago. So, yeah. I don't know.
It's one of the things that I think, living next door, your father was like a father to me. Mm-hmm. You know that as much as I love my dad, and he just wasn't around in those early years. And your dad was a really strong example of what like a man would be.
Yeah.
And so was your family. The fact that, there was a father in the house and a wife in the house, and y'all went to church and y'all did all of these things, and even the extended families, when y'all would have family reunions and just got off the phone with Aunt Louise and go see Uncle Bob. Like all of this stuff was just, I felt like I was a part of the family, and seeing your dad and y'all family structure and how y'all was set up, it was something that I always aspired to, but there was always like a cloak in a way that, in hindsight and thinking about it, like when you're a little kid, you just don't know, but there's a gap, but you don't necessarily know why that gap is there. But and it's just in terms of dynamics more so than behavior patterns. Oh, why is that way? Why can this be done, but that can't be done? Like, why is this and that? And it was just, but I always felt like y'all were very, like what happens in this house stays in this house. And we don't include other people. We don't get other people involved. And if it gets outside of that, then, that's just what it is.
Well, I would say growing up, we didn't know. Like our parents, if they had problems, they never put it out there where we knew what was going on. So there was never a conversation, what happens in this house stays in this house, because they didn't make us privy to those adult things. So it wasn't that dynamic. I think where the disconnect was, our parents were so focused on church and building those relationships that we fell by the wayside. Like we were taken care of. We had need for nothing. I'm not saying we were rich, but I feel like we were upper middle class. Both of my parents worked, had good jobs. We always had a roof. We always had utilities. We didn't always have the name brand things, but we had what we needed.
Oh, yeah.
And, even with extracurricular, we needed money for something, yeah. But your physical presence was never there. We never got hugs. The first time I ever remember my dad telling me that he loved me was on his deathbed. And I told him that I loved him. Wow. But when we had children, our children got all the love, the I love yous, all the hugs, all the kisses. It almost seemed like, to me, we were collateral damage.
To church.
To church. Every holiday we had to share with church family. Our vacations were church conventions. We never had a family vacation. We always had somebody living in our house other than us. So we always felt like we were second to the church. The fact that I even still love God and desire to go to church today is a miracle. Everything was about church. And in the early, because my dad took a church when my mom was 6 months pregnant with us. We used to go to Cameron, Missouri, which was 55 miles one way. So back then, that was like an hour to get to church one way, maybe a little bit more. We did that for almost 18 years.
Yeah,
about
that was a long time.
Years,
yeah.
And that was 2 or 3 times a week. We did that. So everything we would eat, breathe, and drink church. That's all we knew. You know, we had the outlet. We could go outside and we could play and stuff, but just having, even though it was a 2-parent household, my mom, you know, was the disciplinarian. She was the cook. She was the laundry person. She did all of that until we were old enough, but just to have those conversations and have that personal connection to parents, no.
I would have never known that.
They hugged the saints more than they hugged us. They got I love yous. I never in my life have heard my dad tell me I love you until he was on his deathbed. First time. And I was, 36?
Did you feel loved?
To an extent. I felt like love meant taking care of me. That was love. You took care of me, but that's it. You don't show affection. Like, I never saw the affectionate part of it. As I got older, I started to see my parents show affection, but I never saw them hug, never saw them kiss. But as we got older, they were more playful with each other. So I felt like, we were kind of the Huxtables to a certain extent, because that was kind of the picture that was painted for us. And not to say that that's a bad thing, but we didn't get a taste of the real reality of what was going on. And like I said, and then everything was centered around church. As long as we were present, that's all that mattered.
Y'all had like a role to play.
We had a role to play. When I got pregnant with my son, I literally had to get in front of the church and tell them that I was pregnant.
Wait a minute. He made you get in front of the congregation?
Mm-hmm.
Were you like a deaconess? Did you serve like a role or something?
It doesn't matter.
No, I'm just asking.
At that time I was active. I did I was an usher and stuff. I've always been active in the church. And of course, we grew up singing together. Me, my brother and sister, the youngest of us, had our group. And so, yeah, I mean.
What did he tell you why he wanted you to do that?
I guess because that was his way of embarrassing me or cleansing me of my sins. I don't know. Now, the guy didn't have to get up there with me. And then my brother actually had a child out of wedlock by the assistant pastor's daughter. He didn't have to get up there. Same time. We pregnant at the same time. My other brother was having a baby. Second oldest brother was having a baby out of wedlock. We all 3 pregnant. I was the one. So, yeah. I guess I had that proverbial scarlet letter.
That's how you felt?
Yeah. And then I couldn't do anything. I couldn't be active in anything until after I had Tyler. Then it's like I was reactivated.
Did getting married, did that force you to want to get married at that time?
Yeah, because I felt like I had to make it right because I had embarrassed them. So I felt like I had to do the right thing. And it's not that I didn't ever see myself getting married. It was just, I feel like I shouldn't have got married at that time.
Because you were 20?
I was, when I had Tyler, I was 21. So I was 21 when I got married, yeah. And then I went away to college, flunked out, because that was my first taste of freedom. So instead of studying, I'm partying during the week, going to weekends. I still had a bedtime through high school.
Like, they're telling you to go to bed at a particular time?
Yeah, we've always had to be in bed by 9 o'clock on school nights. 9 o'clock. I might get some wiggle room, 10. Only time if we were at church or I had an event at school, that would be probably the only time like that's an exception. But if I'm at home, you're in the bed by 9, 10 o'clock.
And that's the kind of stuff that I think I'm talking about when I say like there's this.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. Yeah. Not that like there's this like deliberate, elaborate plan to like keep things from people, but there's a way in which the house is functioning that is different than what you perceive it to be.
Because even like you remember in the summer times, we be out there playing, running up and down the street, having a good time. Soon as the clock strikes 12, we was in there praying. We had to do the family prayer. You come in on them prayers.
I don't remember that at all.
Like if you out here playing and you want to, and when it's prayer time, come on in here. You can pray with us. You prayed with us before. You may not remember because it's been so long ago, but we used to come in and pray. My mom would do the family prayer. Don't forget the family prayer. Jesus is going to meet you there. We sing that little song when we gather around in the evening. Don't forget the family prayer. We sing that song and we go straight into prayer for an hour. Then we can go back out to play. So those type of things.
When your dad, I got a pen in the sun, people praying for him coming back from Mexico. So I just want to let you know, like that's up here in my head.
Oh, my son. Okay.
But I'm
okay.
Do you think that like the way that your situation went with your dad and like that lack of love and affection from a male had anything to do with like the way you chose men or the kind of men you chose?
I didn't know what kind of man I wanted. That was just never anything that came up in my mind. I know guys have always liked me, and my dad literally would run everybody away, everybody. And I think me getting pregnant was just, it was being naive, just thinking I could do something and get away with it, and got caught up. I didn't know what kind of man I wanted because nobody ever sat down and talked to me about the type of man that I should look for. I saw what I had, but as you get older, you just like, is this what it is? I knew I didn't want to be with no preacher, no pastor. You can miss me with being a first lady because nah, we're not doing that. I knew that much.
Okay.
But that's all. Like, I just knew that I'm supposed to have somebody to take care of me, and that's it. Like, nobody told me nothing. Nobody taught us about sex. Nobody taught us about finances. Nobody taught us about credit. Nobody taught us about what to look for in a relationship, or, you know, how to raise a kid, or, you know, none of that stuff. We didn't know.
One of the things that came to mind when I was reading your book did center around sex. Mm-hmm. And I was like, LaDora sounded like she was pretty, I don't want to say hot to trot,
well, I was.
But you,
I was hot. I wasn't promiscuous, but I was doing stuff.
You were really.
I was a horny teenager.
Okay, thank you. I didn't want. Okay,
yeah,
I think
was a horny
I did.
Teenager.
So,
but how do you curtail that? The only thing my mom would ever tell me: keep your skirt down, and don't be doing no heavy kissing because it leads to other things. That was sex. That was the sex talk. But how do you tell somebody whose hormones are raging? See, my mom was married and had her first child by the time she was 16, 17 years old. So she grew up in that era. My dad grew up in that era where they were married young and, you know, people were having kids at 14, 15. That was the dynamic of that day. But I guess they felt like it didn't apply to us. Like our hormones would just be turned off because we were in church.
So how do you resolve those two things? The urge of the flesh, and then the religious aspect of it too, and then your dad being a prominent preacher.
I was doing stuff that
it's all a mystery to me.
I was doing stuff that I shouldn't have been doing. You know, just being freaky, but not going all the way. Never went all the way until after I graduated high school. But I was doing enough where I might as well have. You know what I'm saying? And just because it felt good. And you think about the religious part of it, but it's like in the moment you feel like you're getting away with it. So it's just like you just keep doing it because you are getting away with it. And so...
You didn't feel any shame or anything when you were doing it? Okay. She said, no.
No. I was having fun, you know, because I'm like, okay, I like this. I think I like the attention, but it was always something I wanted. It was reciprocated. So like nobody ever took advantage of me or touched me inappropriately, you know. It was probably me initiating it. I initiated it kind of with the kid's dad, like, cause I knew he liked me and had been pursuing me, but he was a little younger than me. So I was like, you're a kid, you know, like you're about to graduate high school. I'm already a freshman in college, you know, like I'm dealing with college dudes. But when I came home, he was like high pursuit. So at that time, you know, we got pagers and all we got is notes. So I'm like, you can't handle me. I'm in church with these notes. Like, you ain't ready. Like, you can't hang. Like, I'm singing Usher. Like, no, you ain't ready. And at that point, you know, I'm still kind of wet behind the ears. Like, I had my experience, but I'm just talking crazy. Mm. So it was like, well, you know, basically put your money where your mouth is. I'm like, okay, I'm going to teach this little boy something. In my mind, I'm going to teach him something. I'm going to put it on him, make him think about it. And I was too naive and too scared to be on birth control at my parents' house, because that's where I was living, because my mama was nosy. And if she would have found it, she would have hit the roof. So I was like, I can't be on birth control. But at the same time, I'm out here being reckless. And then I guess I kind of thought, well, it happens to other people. It's not going to happen to me. So we set up this little rendezvous in his mama's house, because the boys slept in the basement. It was rooms in the basement. She was there, but she was so distracted. Like, they snuck me in the back door, spent the night. And the crazy thing about it all, the next day he was like, you pregnant? It's like, no, we used a condom. He was like, but I took it off the last time. It's like, no, you didn't. It's like, you pregnant. And I was pregnant.
Jeez.
I know this is a lot for you, because we've never had these conversations before, so I know it's a lot. Matter of fact, my cousin, who we were just on FaceTime with, is the one that dropped me off.
Of course.
So really, it's her fault.
Of course.
It's really her fault. And we laugh about that to this day.
Of course she was.
Because when my period was late, you know, they lived around the corner. We would walk around there all the time. And she's like my best friend cousin, you know. So I walk around there. I'm like, girl, my period is late. And she was like, shoot, I got this cranberry juice in here. All you got to do is drink this and your period come. It works for me every time. So I'm chugging this cranberry juice like, yeah, my period about to come. She was like, well, if it don't come in the next, I think she said a couple of weeks or something, you know, she was like, let me know. And, you know, I'll take you to get a test. I'm calling her like, sis, it ain't came. So we going to need to make this run to Truman. We go to Truman. She saw that look on my face when I came out of there. Because when the doctor told me I was pregnant, I was like, I know you lying. Like, you must have picked up somebody else's pee. I know I ain't pregnant. When I came out there, she said my face was like I seen a ghost. I was so scared. I was like, there's no way that I could be pregnant.
And he told you he was pregnant. You were pregnant the same day.
He told me, and I think he was just talking out the side of his neck, but he was right. I mean, there's no way he could have known I was pregnant. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, but he did say that.
Okay. Now I'm going to jump back.
Okay.
You get your son back.
Mm-hmm.
You're really not even sure what schizophrenia is at the time. I'm assuming, like I'm sure after you heard, you haven't been living with it long enough and interacting with him because he was gone for 7 months, right? And then he comes back. Let me take a step back. What is schizophrenia?
So it's a mental health disorder. There's different levels to schizophrenia. From what I understand, paranoid schizophrenia is like the highest form of schizophrenia you can have. That's his diagnosis. It brings hallucinations. There's random cloudiness, like he'll just be talking a bunch of stuff that doesn't make sense. He's always like paranoid, like the police was after him. There's nobody out, like I couldn't say his name because he thought if I said it too loud that the government would hear him and know where he was. He got rid of his driver's license, birth certificate, social security card. He didn't want to be identified because he felt like he was in trouble and they were after him. So the biggest part of it is the hallucinations, having a mindset of homelessness. Sometimes people get off into more hardcore drugs, things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in the Black community, I'm projecting at this point, mental health just ain't something we got a lot of familiarity with.
Right. Growing up, if people displayed certain type of behaviors, oh, that's their personality, or, they crazy, don't pay them no mind. But really, these people needed help. And so when my son started presenting symptoms, I just stopped talking to people that I knew about it because, like I said, I got treated like, no, he just faking. Like, no, I know my son. I live with him every single day. Like, I think a parent knows when something is not right with their child or children. Yeah. And so I'm the kind of person, I'll just take the bull by the horn. Like, I don't want to talk to nobody about it. Let me just deal with it the way I deal with it. And so that's what I did. And once I start dealing with that aspect of mental health, it made me look at every homeless person in a different light. It just opened my eyes to something that I had never known or seen before. And it made me really start researching this disease. And, people can live a healthy, successful life, but they have to be on a plan. They have to talk to their psychiatrist. They have to be on the meds. But I believe God is going to heal my son completely one day. I don't know when that day is going to be, but in the meantime, we need to stay focused on the plan that's going to allow him to be successful. And so that's why my nonprofit now is based around mental health and advocating for those who are struggling, like my son. A lot of people, like I was sharing with you earlier, look at me when I say, oh, I'm his guardian and conservator. Like, okay, you got documents? Like, you went to court? Like, people give me these questions and these looks. Like, okay, this Black woman is her son's guardian. I didn't know about guardian and conservatorship until I kept having to call the police on my son. And then the police will say, well, are you his guardian? If you're not, we can't do anything. We can't chase him. If he decides to go to the hospital and they release him, he's released. I remember one time he went to the emergency room. they put him in a cab and sent him to the homeless shelter. So I knew then I have to figure out what this guardianship thing is. And I reached out to a cousin of mine who is a social worker, and she was like, yeah, this is what you need to do. So I had to hire an attorney to fight for me, you know, so that I can be that for my son. And I now help other families who have questions or concerns. And it's crazy because I have a petition on change.org who are advocating for adults who have guardianship and or conservatorship for their loved ones. So in Missouri, where we started out, is guardianship and conservatorship. When my son was in California, they only recognized conservatorship. And even though I have both, because I didn't have it through the state of California, they were giving me a very hard time.
So hold on one second. Help me understand what issues you were having and then how having those things helped you with those issues.
So when I went to the state of California, if anybody has ever had to deal with them from a legal standpoint, they feel like they're exclusive. Let me just say that. And so when my son was down there and I was ready, when I just went to get him in February, I was showing them my paperwork. This is court documentation, okay, that I am his legal guardian and conservator. He is deemed 100% incapacitated to care for himself. This is all documented. And I kept being told, well, it's not for the state of California, which only recognizes conservatorship for adults, elderly adults or adults with mental health issues. They only recognize conservatorship.
What is conservatorship?
It's you're in charge of their estate, their finances, their estate, everything.
Okay.
With guardianship, you're able to make decisions on their behalf that they can't do for themselves. It's almost one and the same. There's only slight differences. But with California, and within this dynamic, they only recognize conservatorship. Guardianship is for children that are under the age of 18, I believe, from what I read. And this is all stuff I had to research before I even went down there. So I talked to an attorney before I went because I thought, well, maybe I need to hire somebody and get it transferred, you know, to that state since that's where my son was. But then I thought about it, I was like, I'm not about to keep going from the East Coast to the West Coast, back and forth, like I had already been doing because I knew he was out there in a homeless community. So while I was out there, they were like, well, we can't talk to you. He still has rights because he's an adult, like was giving me all kind of pushback. It was nothing but God. I was like, I'll camp out outside this hospital until y'all recognize my paperwork, but I'm going to take my son back to Georgia with me, period. And I guess they saw that I was not playing, and I refused to leave without my son. And so finally they complied. I handed them my documents so they can have copies, you know, everything like that. And it was just favor of God, to be honest. It was nothing else, because everybody was just like, no.
And is that is that piece, I imagine you facing a lot of issues, a lot of challenges with dealing with a son who is an adult with mental health issues. Is that one of the biggest that you have as it relates to that from like being able to manage standpoint?
Yeah, because you look forward, you see your children growing up, you look forward to them being independent, doing their own thing, you know, being successful, having relationships, maybe children, you know, at most working, you know, doing the thing. But the fact that I still have to take care of him, I have to make all of these arrangements. And I'm not complaining, so don't look at it as complaining, but it's just like, okay, now I have this responsibility that I didn't think that I would have. But it would be no different if he was diagnosed with a terminal illness, I would step up and do the same thing. So just because it's mental doesn't mean that I'm gonna back off. You know, he's still my son. I still love him and I want him to have a healthy, full life. So I'll do whatever it takes.
You mentioned that there is a way for them to have a thriving life, but it has to be a plan, it has to be medication and stuff involved. What do you do when the person doesn't want to do that?
Well, that's the part of having guardianship and or conservatorship. You force it. Like the last couple of times that my son has been hospitalized is because I've said, you're going. And that even if that means, and I hate to say it, but you know, if you know that they're off their rocker, and this is a crazy thing about the mental health community and the laws. If a police officer, say me and you are sitting here right now talking, but I know you're in a diminished mindset. I know from conversations, I know from your actions, even though you're calm right in this moment, if I were to call the police and say, hey, can you come here? I have a son in a diminished capacity. He needs to be locked up. First thing they're gonna ask me, is he a threat to himself or to others? If I say no, they won't do a thing. Even though I have guardianship and conservatorship, and I'm the one who gets to make that decision about your mental health because I see that you're in a diminished capacity and you're not able to take care of yourself in a reasonable manner, they still won't do anything. So basically what I have to do is say, he's acting out, he's threatening to kill me, and he's doing X, Y, Z. They'll come out and take him right away. That's what I had to do in California.
Does that jeopardize the relationship with the patient? I mean, with your son?
Sometimes. When I had to do it in Kansas City, the last time he ended up in Texas in 2020, I called the police, had it arranged, and he actually kicked me on his way out. He kicked me in my growing private area on his way out in handcuffs. So he remembers, like every now and then now he'll say, oh, you put me in the hospital. He knows. And he'll be upset and he'll not want to talk to me, so he won't like call me or something like that. But then he'll come around. And then the thing about psychosis is that there are points where he's angry at me, he's cussing, going completely off. In the beginning, I used to cry, I used to get upset, like you being disrespectful, until I started learning the disease. And I know that's not my son talking, because if anybody knows my son in his right mind, super mannerable, respectable, would never disrespect me, has never disrespected me, doesn't get in trouble with the law, like very calm, relaxed. Now, if you see him, he'll sit here and talk a mile a minute about nothing. Every now and then he may say something reasonable that I can actually respond to. But otherwise, we were just in a car the other day. He got discharged from the hospital. Literally, we riding around, going different places, making sure he has everything. And I said, you don't get tired of talking? I mean, just talk. I don't even have to respond. He's just going in, just talk, a bunch of randomness. And then all of a sudden he may ask me a question, or sometimes he'll say, oh, this is a 2-person conversation. I'm expecting you to respond. I'm like, oh, I didn't think you were talking to me. And then I may, start chiming in. But that's just how it is. And I don't get upset when he's like, you stupid. He'll call me a crackhead in a minute. You're like, you a crackhead. And then he doesn't call me mama. This time around, it's so different. He'll call me Daco.
Daco?
Daco. I don't know what a Daco is.
D-O-C-C-L-E as an example.
I guess.
Daco.
Daco or D-O-C-A-L. I don't know. But he'll be like Daco, or he'll be like, hey, what's up, Doc? I'm like, hey. I just go with it. You just have to go with it. And a lot of times it's humorous. And sometimes he'll say some stuff that's profound, like he knows chemistry. He's the boy is so brilliant. That's the thing about it. Brilliant. And the other day I said, I'm paying attention. He said, you don't need to pay attention. Attention should be paying you. I said, okay then. You know, like sometimes he'll just throw out something random that really makes sense, that's really profound. And I'm like, how did you put that together? You know, like it doesn't make sense. And before the illness, he was already like funny, would just say little things and had me cracking up. And with the illness, it'll still come out. And stuff be so hilarious. Sometimes he'll be going off. The next minute he'll calm down and he'll just say something that'll have me laughing. And it's just, you just have to go with the flow. It's highs and lows, it's peaks and valleys. And it's just all about knowing what you're dealing with and how to deal with it.
Have you gotten to normal with this at this point?
I feel like, yeah. I feel like I've gotten to where I feel like it's normal. And to the point where, like one day he was like, you look like Black Lives Matter. I'm like, what? You know, you can't help but laugh. Like, what do me looking like Black Lives Matter look like? You know, it's just stuff like that. And I feel like this is his normal. So I meet him where he is. So if he start talking and he's saying stuff that is completely insane, I'm like, yep, you're right. We can go there. We can do this. And he always talking about a riverbank, or he's talking about a chimney. Everything is a flame. And I'm like, a flame? I have a small commercial cleaning company. So one day I took him with me to clean my building. He didn't want me to use the products to clean. He was like, it's a flame. I don't know how it's a flame. So then he wants to read the can to see what the ingredients are. Everything is about a flame. Everything is about having a chimney. Like he didn't want to go into buildings that had a flat roof. That would be a whole tantrum. I'm not going in there, I got a flat roof. Okay. So now I'm just conforming to whatever he says. Okay, well, we can figure it out. We'll get it worked out. It's almost trying to talk to a little kid, you know, that think they know, but they really don't. So you're just like, okay, well, let's see what we can do. You know, you just kind of talk to them on their level. And that's just what I have to do. Now, yesterday, we actually had a somewhat decent conversation. Mm. But most times it's like way over my head.
And you have a second child. He has a younger sister.
Yes.
Has his diagnosis impacted that relationship in any way?
Yeah. My daughter is a little different because she's always wanted to be an only child. Like she always got this only child mentality. And I love my children equally, treat them the same. And I think for her, it was hard to understand, like, why is he like this? How did he get like this? The same questions that I had. And we've been learning together. And lately, she's been doing her own research to see what it is. And she'll call me like, did you know this? Did you know that? And she'll ask me certain questions because, as I was explaining before, like, I'm not going to live forever. I would love to. But in the event that something happened to me, what if I become incapacitated? I need her to step up because we're all we have. I don't know of anybody else who would be willing to take on this challenge. And it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. Even before I came out here, I was telling you, I got notice last week that he was being discharged this Tuesday of this week. And I had to scramble and get his living situation together real fast. And that was just a couple of days before I came here. So it's just like, there's always something to do. Every time he moves or he's in the hospital, you got to call Social Security. You got to let them know. You know, if he takes on a job, I got to let them know. If He gets rid of his driver's license. He has no ID. I had to take him to get a Georgia ID. I had to reorder another Social Security card. I got to get his birth certificate. There's always going to be something. I got to get his Medicaid switch from California to Georgia. You know, all this hopping around. Like, so you always have to do something. It's literally like having a little kid all over again, just in an adult body.
You mentioned that you believe that God is going to heal your son. Mm-hmm. Did you feel that way about your dad?
I didn't know my dad was as sick as he was. And we all talk about that to this day. I lived in the house with them. We knew when he was diagnosed that it was malignant and it was inoperable. We knew that. So he was doing these round-the-clock treatments in the hospital for like 5 days at a time. Then he's come home. So, you know, seeing him in the hospital, then coming home, like, Dad, how you doing? I'm getting better. I'm doing good. And it appeared that he was doing better. So to this day, I don't know if he had a conversation with my mom and said, hey, this is where we are, but we're not going to tell the kids. Or he knew and didn't share it with any of us. Because we were all thinking he's getting better. The last time that he went into the hospital, he was doing his last rounds of round the clock. And I was at work. I was working for the school board back then. And my mom called and said they want to meet with the family today. The doctor wants to talk to us. Like, okay, I'm expecting to hear a positive prognosis. Like, this is where we are with everything. And we literally get in the room and they say, now mind you, this is around the second week of December. And they said, well, we're going to try to get him through Christmas. Christmas was 2 weeks away. They said at best, first of the year. You could hear a mouse pee on cotton. Because we all looking like, Christmas is 2 weeks away. What are you saying? We're trying to get him through Christmas. We thought he was getting better. He literally walked in that hospital that week and was not able to walk out. He had to be medically transported. He could not talk. Like, he would try to say little things like above a whisper. And what people don't know is that I was angry with my dad for so long. I was angry. Not because he was sick, because I was sick of that church. I loved his ministry, but I was so sick of that church and just the way he was handling things. And so when they told us that, I was devastated because I'm thinking, okay, he's getting better. And you're telling me he may have 2 weeks. So it was at that hospital by his side. I hugged him and I said, I'm so sorry. And I love you. And he said, I love you too. You're a good daughter. And those were the last words he ever said to me. And I hold that because that meant so much, because for 36 years, I never heard that. And the fact that I lived under his roof And never, because of my pride, I didn't want to have that conversation with him. Just chose to be angry. I still went to church. I still functioned in all of my capacities. But I was so angry. It's hurtful when you dedicate your life to a ministry, especially your dad's. And I'm called to the ministry at that time to preach. I felt like I was called to preach. You see everybody else get their turn, but you never get yours in his own pulpit. My dad had never asked me to speak at our church. The one time I did speak is because the lady who was the president of the young people asked me, and he was in the office the whole time.
Wow.
I've seen I was the choir director, I was the praise and worship leader. We had a guy that come in and he could play the organ. I've seen people come in, they get paid. I never got a thank you. I've seen people be recognized. I never got that recognition, but I was always there, always faithful. Even if it wasn't monetary, just to say, we appreciate you. I did so much, and I just felt like it was unappreciated. And especially when you see other people come in and having these elaborate appreciations, they getting money, they getting paid every week. And it's just like, for me, it's my reasonable service.
Did you ever talk to your mom about this?
No, I never talked to nobody. At one point, I thought about leaving my dad's church. But I said I would not feel comfortable going to any of our area churches because he was friends with so many people in the community and he was active in like concerned clergy and all that stuff. I said I felt like it would have been a slap in his face had I left, like, especially with the role that I played, and I left and went somewhere else, and he's over here. I just still was trying to save face. I'm always about saving face.
I think you probably,
Yeah, and so why would I do that and make him look bad? It's always, to me, been about making them look good. And he was a great person. God used him mightily. Like I said, his ministry was second to none. Any of my friends get sick, anybody I know, okay, I'll have my dad come pray for you. And most of the time people got better. When he got sick, I didn't understand how he died. Because I've seen people come to church with stage 4 cancer and go back to the doctor and they can't find it. So how does this man that God has used to heal these people die from cancer in a matter of months? That was May to December, and he was gone. How does that happen?
The reason why I asked about the healing thing related to your dad versus your son is, sometimes I feel like our pain or our desires can impact how we see the way God is moving. And I had to come to terms with that with my dad when he was sick. He's extremely devout Christian, and he was the one. He had about a year and a half where he was fighting, and he was going through all of these treatments and to try to get things better. And I remember going to the doctor, where it was me, him, and his wife, and they were like, yeah, man, you got 6 months. And this might have been like in August, I think, because he passed in February. And they know whatever them time frames are, they got it down.
They got it down.
So it was like, yeah, we about 6 months, about all you got. And my father was just so diligent and hell-bent and convinced that God was going to heal him. Like, that's all he just kept saying. God's gonna heal me. He was going online. He was donating money to televangelists and doing all kind of wild stuff. And, you know, I had this immediate need to want to try to make sense of it all somehow, and realize that I just didn't have the capacity to do that. But
I still don't understand it. To this day, I'm like.
But isn't that the place where faith comes in, though?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we have faith, but then again, I feel like everything happened so fast. They told us, let's get him through Christmas. Christmas was 2 weeks away. He died 2 days later.
Oh.
I just felt like we wasn't ready. Like literally everything happened so fast. And like he never told the church what was really going on with him. It's just once we got the diagnosis, he went home, and my mom said, let everybody who wants to come from the church come over and see him and say their goodbyes, you know, and literally 2 days later he was gone. So I don't know. I struggle with that. Like, God, why would you do that? And the crazy thing about, he had Burkitt lymphoma, and it was something with his intestines. And they said that type of cancer usually only occurs in young people through age 22. It's very rare that someone his age would even get that particular cancer. But it was the size of a football when they found it. You know, so it was already stage 4, already inoperable, and it's stress related. We were building a church at that time. We already had the church we were in, and we were growing so fast, you know, in that community membership wise, and just doing a lot of great things. I just didn't understand, like, God, why would you take him now? We're not even in this new building. Like, why, what? And he was like, I would tell him all the time when we start growing, like, let's get an attorney on retainer because we're growing too fast. And we need to make sure we have all of our ducks in a row. And during the time we were in the building phase of the new church, I had gotten laid off from the board. And I was like, I'm available if you need me for anything. He never used me, but he used the people that he did use, end up mistreating him, end up being backstabbers.
What do you think that was about you?
I don't know, because all his male friends, like that he called his brothers and stuff, would always say, your dad talks about you all the time. And he talks about how you be out here preaching and you singing and doing all this stuff. And he always speaks so highly of you. Never told me that. I don't know what that was about. I don't know. I don't know. And I guess I never will. You know, it's just some things you just have to learn to live with. And those are some of the things that I'm just learning to live with, to be honest. I feel like he had a lot of people at that church that saw how God used him. They pulled on him. I remember phone be ringing middle of the night, early in the morning, midday. He get up, going to bail people's kids, bail people out of jail, their kids out of jail, somebody in the hospital. I'm going to pray for people, you know, people he didn't even know. You know, I'm singing at random people's funeral. I don't know these people from a hole in the wall, Well, I need you to come sing at this funeral. Somebody got cremated. I'm looking at ashes. I'm singing for their memorial. I don't know these people, but if you need me in that capacity, you gonna use my voice. But you can't use me anywhere else. I got a degree in business management on purpose to help you. So, I have friends who are attorneys that would have been on board to help and probably would have charged us little to nothing, to just do whatever we needed him to do. But it's just like he didn't know how to say no to people. He left here with people owing him thousands of dollars. People still owing, my mom, she's still living. I'm like, send the money to us, but they just the kind of people like, okay, whatever. And I think part of that is that a lot of people made him a little G God. And I feel like maybe God took him because it was getting to the point where it was really out of control with how people saw him versus the God in him.
Did he do anything to kind of like encourage that, or he was just out doing his thing? And then
he was a very humble person.
Yeah.
He's just doing his thing. I never saw him be like conceited or haughty or feel like that was him. It was all God. I'm gonna say that, and that's with all honesty. He never like, oh, this is me doing this. He loved that God used him in that way. He loved that. But he never was like, oh, God used me this kind of way. God used me that. And some people came, they got healed and never came back and said thank you or anything.
You described your pop as a prophet. Mm-hmm. What does that mean in your faith? When
God speaks to you and gives you something about a revelation about someone or about something, is usually something that's futuristic. And sometimes it could be something that's already happened, but God is giving that person something to share with another person or about something.
And do you think that, let me ask you a separate question. In what ways do you think you've benefited from the way that your dad treated you?
I can only speak on the ministry part of it. I feel like I definitely have that ministry side of him. I feel like God uses me prophetically, but I don't tap into it like that. But I definitely have that ministry that he had when it comes to things like that. Even like, people say preaching or teaching. I feel like I'm more of a teacher, an educator of the gospel. I feel like I'm good at that. I feel like I got those things from him.
And I mean the things when you say like he was hard on you. In what ways do you think you've benefited from the ways he was hard on you? Or I don't want to say ignore or didn't acknowledge the parts that
it made me want to be better with my kids. I tell my kids all the time that I love them. I hug them and showed them that affection. So it taught me to do things in the opposite way when it came to that part of it. Where I felt the lack inside of the home on a personal level, it made me intensify it when it came to my children or even in my relationship. I feel like I'm very affectionate and, I want to be reciprocated in that manner as well. So I feel like in those areas, it taught me to be better. Like, this is not I don't want to be what I saw. I want to, put my love into action. And it's like, yeah, we celebrated birthdays and stuff. You did things like that. But like, if my kids were involved in sports, I'm going to show up. Like I was a cheerleader. I ran track. I was on honor roll. I did all these things. My parents were never present for those big accomplishments.
I didn't think about that till you just said something.
Yeah, they were never present for any of those huge moments. The only track meet that my dad ever came to was by accident. He came to pick me up. The track meet ran long. I ended up doing like an additional heat. And I was like a 400, whatever is all the way around the track. I don't run long distance. I do sprints. And so I got thrown into a heat. He was there to pick me up and end up being in the bleachers. His takeaway from that day was another girl that we know, I ain't gonna call her name on camera, but she was so slow. She was tired, but she kept running until she finished. And up until his dying day, he would always reference that girl. The race is not given to the swift, but the one that endured to the end. And it was in reference to that girl.
Your daddy,
but you
boy.
didn't recognize me for being in the race, period.
No. Oh, that's...
But that was his takeaway. That was his takeaway from the only event that he ever came to support me in. My mom never came to any game or anything. Like,
did they go to your younger brothers?
They weren't allowed to play sports. You're talking about Clarence. No. I think he may have gone to maybe a couple of his games. But I think he felt as long as we had what we needed, like the monetary part of it, anything that was expense-wise related to those things, they were doing their part. Or we got to work, so we don't want to, and we always had 2 cars. So it's not like somebody could be at work and another person, I don't know. I don't know.
As you're talking about your dad and thinking about the person that I knew,
he always loved on you.
Oh, he was dope.
But it was the other people was where his energy was, but it just wasn't for us.
But it's similar to how I think about what you have to do with your son and imagining all of the difficulty around that. Mm-hmm. And you know, when you're called to do something, when you're called to show up as this thing and to fulfill this purpose and to be this, you know, everybody's not going to see that the same way on the outside. And you're not even going to show up to everybody in the same way. And what I find as sad as I am to hear some of the pieces of what you're saying, especially because of what I imagine your home to be, mm-hmm. I do appreciate his commitment to his purpose in that way. Yeah. To just still show up and be something for people.
No, I love that.
Yeah.
I admired that about him. And to this day, he's like my hero.
Yeah.
Like, I love that man. And I wish I had more time with him. If I had more time with him, there's so many things I would have, so many conversations that I would have had and just been not afraid. I think I was afraid. He was such a giant to me. And I just felt like I couldn't talk to him.
He was.
And I wish I just didn't have that fear, because if I had it to do all over again, I would absolutely have those hard conversations. And just to see, maybe he would talk to me, maybe he wouldn't. I don't know. But I will never get that opportunity to know. But I love the person that he was. Like, pulling up at a McDonald's drive-thru and he's talking to the people by name like he'd been knowing them forever. Like, what?
Yeah.
And he was funny. He was a comedian. He was an artist.
What?
That's one thing he never drew, but he was an artist.
Really?
He would not ever really tap into it. That my son is an artist. He gets that from his grandpa. But yeah.
I didn't know. Because he was in the Navy, right?
He was in the Navy. Mm-hmm. And it's crazy how he was stationed in California. My son ended up there. And I think he was in that San Diego area, matter of fact. My dad, when he served.
One of the things I read about you, one of the things I discovered about you that I didn't know is, and you mentioned it as it relates to your pop, is like this thinking about others in this way, even to like not rock the boat, or there's something about wanting to like please people.
Yeah, save face. You know, you don't want to hurt people's feelings, so you just go with the flow, even if you don't want to, because it's just like, it's the right thing to do.
What inside of you labels it as the right thing, though?
That's a good question. I guess because that's the standard that's been set as right, so that you adopt that thinking as this is the right thing to do. Even though it may not feel right to you, or you're just like, don't want to do that thing, you do it because that's what's been adopted as normal.
Do you take that approach with women?
With women? In what way? What do you mean?
In what, like the way, like to save face, or are you more? I don't know. What's the word?
I don't do a lot of things I used to do anymore. Like I've scaled back a lot because I'm a very vocal person, and I've learned in my 47 years that it's not always what I say, but how I say it. So I'm more mindful of the things that come out of my mouth before I say it, because I don't mind hurting people's feelings, because it's just like people don't mind hurting mine. And I'm just tired of being the nice guy. So I'm gonna let you have it. But God is working on me with that. And so I feel like no matter if you're a man or a woman, you're gonna be treated the same. I'm not about saving face anymore.
Okay.
I'm about what you're presenting to me. If I like it, I'll accept it. If I don't, I'll walk away. But I'm not trying to, be okay with something that I'm not okay with. No. Okay. I think, and that's part of self-care, because if I keep doing stuff that I know that I don't want to do, nobody's carrying that burden but me. You're happy, but I'm not. So no, I'm not doing that anymore.
Did you get any counseling support or therapy for anything?
I did. Even when my parents were alive, I went to therapy. And he told me my parents are controlling.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Especially my mom. For years, I didn't even like her.
Whoa.
I didn't. Because she was just always had something to say. Even I had been married, had kids, but you want to tell me who I shouldn't date, be careful about these men. These are conversations I should have had before I even had a baby, the first one. At this point, let me just figure it out, because I felt like I knew enough to where I'm going to be careful. I'm not about to jump into no more traps. At least not intentionally. And yeah, just for a long time. And then living in her house made it worse. And I think that's why I carried what I carried for her for so long. And she's always the kind of person where she be like, we need to talk. So I think I get it from her. It's not what you say, but how you say it. Anytime your parent be like, we need to talk, you already know you in trouble.
Yeah.
But how am I be adult in trouble? You know what I'm saying? And I just told her one day, like, don't ever say you want to talk to me. Excuse me.
What?
I said, because at that point I was like, I'm almost 40 years old. I'm not a child. I can't get in trouble. I know what I know. And if I want to talk, I'll let you know. But you coming to me, telling me you want to talk, we're not doing that no more. And she never did. She got mad at me, wrote me a long text message.
It's just so. It's just almost like, you know.
She wrote a long text message. I would never talk to my mom like that. But I've always respected my parents. You know, yes ma'am, no ma'am.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, like I'm not gonna be disrespectful. Everybody has their breaking point. But she just felt like she could always mommy me. And you're gonna always be my mom. And I'm gonna need that advice, but I don't need you coming to me telling me what some church member said about me. I don't need that. Like, stop doing that. Quit taking these people's side. They don't know me, and clearly you don't either, if you believe them.
It's so,
I know it blows your mind because you know, because of just how we grew up and what you are used to seeing. But there's always stuff that's deeper than what you see on the surface. And these are the deep things that you're talking about, the connection. That kind of brings a connection. And then as you get older, you know, of course, we went our separate ways. So for years, you know, you've been here. I was in Missouri, and then I end up in Georgia. So it's just like life goes on, and you really don't know what people are dealing with, what they're going through. But yeah, we got it together, you know.
And it's weird because it's our childhoods are in a way crystallized. They're like a fixed thing. And some of the things that you're describing is actually pulling at these concepts that have been fixed in my head.
But you know what? I'm going to say this. I think we were allowed to be children. Where today's dynamic, these kids know everything about everybody and everything.
Yeah.
We were so sheltered from those things that, you know, I'm glad we only saw the surface things. Yeah. But then as you get older, you start connecting the dots, putting two and two together, and you're like, what in the world? Like, this was so dysfunctional. Like, how would we? But I'm glad that we didn't have that, because I think I would be really messed up had I known, you know, a lot of things that I know now.
And I think if somebody were to listen to your story, mind you, we only talking about 5%.
Yeah.
Max 5. Like,
right.
There's a lot there, right? So, but I think, and what I'm challenging is your statement that be messed up. Like, a lot happened. Yeah. And I think if somebody was listening to your story, they would be like, I would be messed up.
Yeah.
And reality is somehow, some way, we figure out how to persist, how to thrive, how to make it work, and then how to show up and be something marginally better for the people we're responsible for.
Right.
As we try to figure it out.
And that's the thing. And it's not being perfect.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, trying to show up and, like you said, be a little bit better. And I love the fact that I grew up with morals and standards. I look back on things and I'm like, I'm glad my parents were hard on me a certain way. So I don't take my upbringing for granted. And this is by no way bashing my parents or anything like that, because I love them both dearly. And like I said, even before my mom got dementia, we were good. We were in a very good place. And I love her to this day. And at the end of the day, even though there were some things that didn't sit right with me, I'm glad that I had those things, because as an adult, I used those tools, and I'm like, I'm so glad I say that often, like that my parents just taught me how to respect myself, how to have humility, you know, just little things that you wouldn't think would matter when you're young and you're hearing it and you just think they nagging and just talking out the side of their neck. As an adult, I'm like, okay, I understand that now. But like my mama used to say, you'll understand it better by and by. And that's the truth. If you keep living, you're going to go through some things and you're going to be able to make those connections. And so it's now that I've been through some things and I will continue to grow as long as God keeps me here, that I'm making those connections. And so I do appreciate those things.
And these are things that you've been living with for 47 years.
Yeah.
This is shit I'm hearing for the first time.
For the first
time. So, and that's the reason why it's sounding, I've never heard you say anything bad about your parents.
Never.
Let me rephrase that. I'm gonna rewind because I want to make sure that I'm clear. I've never heard you speak so honestly about the way that you feel about your parents. Yeah. I don't even think I've heard you, now that I can recall, I don't even think that you've said they were just your parents. And that might be just one of the points of just living in that damn house. It's like, this is the water that you swim in. This is the air that you breathe. Yeah. And every now and then you look up and you start to question things. You start to see things differently. And you've been going through that process for a lot longer. And so and thank you for just even us. Like, this is like, I feel like this is just me getting to just know you more. Yeah. And especially even, you know, after reading the book. And I love your family. There's nothing that you could say that could change my mind or my feelings about your dad, your mom. You know, I know your whole family.
Right. And they love you. I mean, even my mama today with the dementia, she was like, of course I know who you are. How could I forget you?
Yeah, she said it take a lot to forget something. I was like, she's just sitting there. She's this 4'11", dark-skinned woman. I'm just made up a number. I don't know if she's 4'11". She's short.
4'11", 5 feet.
And she's just so sweet. She was a computer teacher at our school. And she it was just, they were great. You know, and that's the crazy part too. It's sometimes we're so much more for other people.
Yeah.
And we don't get to decide what we are. Yeah. You know, we just have to align ourselves with what God's purpose is for us and manage the fear and all of the stuff associated with it. And then whatever that person thinks we are, that's what they're responsible for. And he doesn't, I remember wanting to be friends with your brother. And I would cuss like a sailor. You remember that? And I'd be cussing, 5 years old, like I was Eddie Murphy Jr.
Because you had a potty mouth.
In front of adults and everything.
Well, your family was cussing like sailors.
Exactly.
So, I mean.
And like bad, like there was nothing wrong with it.
I mean, you wasn't a bad kid. You just had a bad mouth.
Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah.
And I remember going to go knock on the door and I was like, you coming out to play? And your brother was like, my daddy said I can't play with you. And I was like, why? He was like, because you cuss too much.
Wow.
And I asked him, I said, so if this is what I remember, right? It's probably wrong. And I was like, can you ask your daddy if I stop cussing, can we play? And your daddy was like, if he stops cussing, y'all can play. I never cussed in front of your dad again.
I don't know if I ever heard that story.
Yeah,
but that sounds like something my daddy would say.
And I was and the crazy part about it, your father, from what I can recall, as much as I was completely out of line as a little boy, he didn't try to correct me. I wasn't like judge. It's not like he was like, I think there was something like in his mind where he was like, they wilding over there in that house. So this ain't this boy's fault.
Right.
I just need to make sure he ain't gonna rub off on my kids. So I made that adjustment, and he was just, I did what I needed to do to maintain the friendship, but I never really felt judged by him at all. I just remember him being this force.
And I think like the respect that he had in that neighborhood, especially on that block, to where your grandmother and Walt, they were living together. They were married for years.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden they want to get married, and they get married in our living room.
Yeah.
Like my dad literally marries them right there in the living room. And it's not my dad ever said, well, y'all shacking, y'all need to get married, I'm a pastor, and y'all don't. He just accepted people where they were, and he loved people, period. He was a people person. And out the clear blue, they wanted to get married, and he married them without second thought in our living room. And that's something I will never forget. Because I'm just like, wow, all these years, why now? To myself, I'm thinking.
To you?
Yeah, I'm like, all these years, y'all been living over here, just living together, building a whole life with kids and grandkids, and now y'all getting married, But I thought it was so cool, and I thought that it spoke volumes about who my dad was and
that
his
they
character,
asked him.
that they would even ask him and respect him enough to say, hey, can you marry us?
Yeah.
So,
I agree.
I thought that was big.
I agree.
Yeah. And I think everybody in the neighborhood, hey, Rev, he just loved people. He loved people. And that's what I loved about him. Like, he never met a stranger. And I think that was one of the best qualities about him.
You said meeting people where you were. It made me think about you and your son and how you have to meet him where he is. Mm-hmm. And, when I think back, it's weird because like when we were little kids, there was so much possibility. Mm-hmm. Like the world was so big. It was almost too big in a way, and the possibility was just too big. Like everything was just big, and what we imagined our lives to be.
Right.
At this point, and you having children and me being where I am, and all of the influences that we had in our lives to get us to where we are, to show up in this way.
I believe everything happens for a reason. Everything that we have done to date and everything that we will do is predestined by God. He already knows the end from the beginning from the end. And I just feel like everything has lined up the way it's supposed to. Even though things have happened in our lives that may not be favorable to us, I think it was supposed to happen. Whether it was to be a lesson or whatever the case may be. I don't look at things that I've had as losses or things I've went through as losses. They're lessons for me. Even with being married and divorced twice, I would have never, you couldn't have paid me to think, by 47, I'll be married and divorced twice, raising 2 kids, but they're not losses, they lessons. When you know better, you do better. That's how I think, and it's just like, okay, I learned my lesson. And so I'm just going to ride this out by myself or, with a companion, but let's not commit that far. Let's not go that far. Let's not go that far.
Now, so let me ask you a question. It sounds like you're blame. No, I don't want to say blame. It sounds like marriage is the culprit in this.
I wouldn't say marriage is the culprit. I think the people in the marriage are the culprits. It's just that being married sometimes isn't the right thing. I think you can be in a long relationship and not be married. I mean, that's solely based off of my experiences. I only felt like I needed to be married because of religious purposes, because I was always taught it's better to marry than to burn. It's better to marry than to burn. So you need to be married. You need to have kids. You need to do this. And I think that's appropriate. I think it's right if it's right for you. In this moment in time, if you ask me today, will I ever get married again? The answer is absolutely not.
Now, so I'm hearing you say marriage is the culprit.
But it's really not the culprit. It's the people. It's the dynamic. Would I marry? Oh, so the person that I'm with now, would I marry him? Absolutely, yes. I would. Do I want to? No. And I know that doesn't make sense.
The marriage is the culprit.
It's not the culprit.
So
I think marriage changes dynamics.
How?
Sometimes. I think because sometimes people look at it as ownership, or it looks at it as, okay, now I can do what I want to do. That's been my experience. And there are some good, strong, healthy marriages, and I advocate for marriage because there are days where I'm like, should I get married? Do I want to get married? But when I look back and I think about it, I'm just like, I'm cool. You know, like, it's kind of hard to explain, but if we good, just let's ride this wave of good.
And
why add anything extra to it? Like, we don't need that extra sauce. We good with the sauce we got. Like,
it's Happily Never After. Number 1 on Oprah's book club.
Speak it.
I'm calling it.
Would you please speak it?
Reading this, I understand why you say that.
Yes.
But I also see opportunities for you.
Opportunities? That's plural.
Opportunities as an individual woman.
Okay.
To do some things differently to put you in a better position.
Okay.
To be to choose the right partner for marriage.